Greetings, world. Greetings, YouTube. Greetings, Facebook. Welcome to the Joko Conversations, where we're going to have a Sunday with James, bringing our comrade James back soon. I'm Brother Youssef, member of the Joko, a poet, a professor, a well-wisher, and all those things. And I'm joined by my partner and comrade, Tasha. Hi, Tasha.
Hi, Yusuf. And greetings, everybody. So we're so glad to glad to be back on a Sunday and preparing to chop it up with our dear Professor James Simmons, Professor of Africana Studies at Cal State Northridge. Activist and his famous longtime movement attorney and community organizer and activist. And his favorite nomer, he has said, is Uncle James, to be known by folks in the younger generation of organizers and activists as Uncle James. And he has certainly been a dedicated and trusted wise, temperate, he's just a good, hearty brother. And it's always our pleasure to chop it up with him. And one of the original folk who said, yes, I really like the idea of a Joko effort. And so he has been on the Joko train since the first day, quite literally. And so, we start as we always do, and I'll be a little bit briefer today with our opening invocation. We just give thanks for being the people who we are, and acknowledge that we got to be the people who we are because of the people who parented us, right? And we mean that in an extended way, right? That we, for all of the positive influences that we absorbed, for all the lessons learned and conferred, um, the mannerisms, the gestures, the sayings that come to mind. We are grateful and we acknowledge all of that because it brings us to this place where we make the conscious choice to work on behalf of the people and on behalf of liberation, for the oppressed peoples of the world, for the oppressed beings, all living things, for a um, over extracted earth, for a malused earth. We look forward to being a part, and we look forward and we are glad to be a part of the effort to create justice, to make right, yeah, in these realms. And acknowledge, of course, all of those who been in, have been exercised their ingenuity, their cleverness, their courage, their um, perseverance, whose names we may know, whose names we may never know, um, who are part of this African family, who are a part of other families in the earth, who have also been a part of that push for a just world for humans and all the beings in it. And we all never forget that the liberation work we do on the unceded territories, on the unceded land of what some of the First Nations people refer to as Turtle Island. Um, at the hospitality of those ancestors and the hospitality of the peoples that are still working for their sovereignty, maintaining their sovereignty, pushing back against the invasion of 1492 and such. Um, and these are folk with whom we seek and cultivate alliance and certainly represent that alliance as African descended people, not as people who identify more with the history of slavery, with the social ill of slavery, and define themselves in terms of that rather than defining themselves with the substratum culture that links all Black people in the diaspora together. That Africa, we are African people who came into these lands that came to be called the Americas, and we don't forget that. And with that, we are glad to dedicate Sundays to current events, right? In particular, looking at the march, so to speak, of uh, authoritarianism, fascism, all anti-democracy, all of the things that it's being talked about and called these days, um, and all of the different forces that conspire to push that agenda forward. And of course, James has been a our number one contributor and a person who has studied, for instance, on the ground, boots on the ground, white supremacist and white nationalist movements locally and nationally. Um, and so, you know, we'll be able to look at these things from a broad and deep perspective. And Brother Yusuf, I'm going to hand it back to you to frame us, frame our discussion.
Well, I think you've just framed it really, because it's what's currently happening, right? The it's been now what, uh, more than 10 days, or 10 days in LA of resistance to the ice raids, and that, that's, I think, one of the stories of the week for sure. The Even in the face of the militarization of, or really the further militarization, or the direct militarizing of of policing dissent, with the deployment, you know, of not just the National Guard, right, and the federalizing of the National Guard by the Trump administration, the Trump regime, but the deploying of Marines, right, that really ratcheting it up, you know, the energies up, um, knowing, right, that is what generates um, more resistance. But what shouldn't be lost in that, and the discourse that demonstrators are in LA are just falling, giving the regime what it wants, right? Um, but as I mentioned last week, right, these running skirmishes with ICE are nothing new, right? They're just a little more uh, intensified and spectacular, per the orders of Stephen Miller, to send ICE agents to places like Home Depot, etc. It as we were saying, it's sharpening contradictions. People are having to admit, or maybe fully understand, just how integrated into the economic and social fabric of Southern California, if not the nation, and it is the nation, immigrant populations are, whatever their status, right? Whatever the legal status is. And and it's also very clear, though, that at this point, this administration no longer cares about status. They're just, how many stories have come up, that legal folks with legal status are being deported, are being kidnapped. And communities in Los Angeles continue to resist, right? And to resist in militant ways that doesn't require armed uprising, so to speak, but are still militant about ICE out. And I think I said this last week or Thursday. It's one thing right now that the people in the streets and the local political leadership, by and large, that is, elected officials, by and large, are in agreement on. ICE must go. So, that is the frame. Now we can add to that what happened at the was it Thursday that there was the Christie Nome press conference in Westwood, at the Westwood Federal Building, and sitting U.S. Senator. So again, this is the system, right? These are folks within the structure, um, and a sitting senator hustled out of the room, manhandled, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
within his rights to
Mm-hmm.
ask a question, do
Mm-hmm.
oversight, um, clearly identifies himself as a senator, never even got the chance to,
Mm-hmm.
show his credentials, right? He wasn't even asked for his credentials.
Mm-hmm.
Roughed up, well, ushered out physically, and he's resisting being pushed out like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
taken to the ground, handcuffed, all this stuff. And just another example, though, of the way in this regime, the way this regime is unabashed about going after its political opposition within the structure. Never mind actual revolutionaries.
Mm-hmm.
And we already know from the first Trump years his willingness to use, actual violence, actual bullets
Absolutely.
against protesters, not just the
Mm-hmm.
rubber bullets,
Mm-hmm.
the other so-called non-lethal things that the LAP and the LA County Sheriff is using, and that are going on in other cities and places around the country that isn't getting quite the coverage. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so their willingness, right, to up the ante, and as it's been reported or opined, Los Angeles is the kind of testing ground for them. Um, Maybe the beta test, because I don't think they're going to not do it other places. Seeing
Mm-hmm.
what they can learn about how to do it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
so that context, right? In
Mm-hmm.
the political assassinations that took place
Yes.
yesterday
Yes.
in Minnesota, as this, this is now the atmosphere. It's been confirmed that the shooter is a Trump supporter, not just this time around. Um, and I don't think that, I think there have been some other instances of, actually that aren't getting widely reported. A Trump supporter that, shot a black college official somewhere down south. I can't remember the exact details. This was maybe a couple of months ago now. So things are ratcheting up. And I think that's how the regime wants it. The So that's the frame, and yet the resistance is high. There's an incredible turnout for the No King's Day, um, demonstrations yesterday, demonstrations, protests, marches, in all of the major cities and lots of little towns and suburbs. And I know here in Southern California, we had several, right? The major one here in downtown Los Angeles,
Yeah.
and then the ongoing resistance, right, to the militarization and the deployment of ICE, which is still wilding around the the region. But in all these other places, so here, just in Southern California, right, there was one in Torrance, um, Santa Monica, Culver City, I believe Hollywood, had a separate one. Um, Importantly, Beverly Hills, in a
Mm-hmm.
park where during the first Trump rule,
Mm-hmm.
there were regular demonstrations there in favor of Trump's policies,
Mm-hmm.
right? Beverly
Mm-hmm.
Hills. I forget the park in Beverly Hills, but
Mm-hmm.
not yesterday. Those don't happen anymore. Um, and Beverly Hills had a No King's Day march, and whatever the fairly liberal politics of the organizers of the No King's Day marches, they
Mm-hmm.
attracted all kinds of political tendencies,
Yeah.
and issues, right, to be addressed. Um, and then the very sad display of
Yes.
was supposed to be the massive, military
Very
parade.
cool. Yes.
And I agree. There's been some commentary about the lack of sharpness of the marching troops.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen some comments on YouTube, and I don't mean the YouTubers, but within their comments, veterans and such, that people need to recognize that that sloppy marching
Mm.
was their form of
It's a
protest.
protest.
Was
Okay.
their protest. They know how to march, right? I mean, that they know how
Okay.
to drill, but yeah, that was their silent form of protest, because the military,
Mm-hmm.
it's been clear, the military
Mm-hmm.
wasn't really happy about this, right, and having to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So that even that, it can perhaps should be seen. Folks who can't speak up, and so
Yes.
but
Yes.
demonstrate their disapproval through these types of measures. And I think there have been similar sorts of things that rank and file military are doing, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
horrible for morale for your military. I mean, I'm not a fan of the U.S. military, but I appreciate, I appreciate the dissent, right? The,
Yes.
I mean, just that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that's the framework. As the things are heating up. As you've heard me say, I have, I'm pessimistic myself about a peaceful resolution, and mainly because I don't believe the Trump regime, their MAGA base,
Yeah.
will want that, allow that in many ways, and that which they more or less demonstrated on the January 6, 2021,
Mm-hmm.
and then confirmed when, on day one, he pardoned them just like he said he would.
Mm-hmm.
So and we see what they're doing, right? This,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
with this latest
Yeah.
political assassination attempts, and mainstream politicians being,
Yes.
toying with the idea of arresting sitting politicians and using language
Yeah.
to dehumanize and demonize.
Yeah.
Um, that
Yeah.
very much sets the stage for and gives space for this behavior.
And apparently, only continues to provide fuel for these growing protests. I mean, we'll
Yeah.
see what the next one is, but I doubt that this kind of energy just goes home after, particularly um, in terms of folk being really aware of that wave of energy, that wave,
Hmm.
how massive,
Hmm.
it actually was. Um,
Right.
and I wouldn't
Millions.
millions of people, and I certainly wouldn't say it was unanticipated in the sense, because what was the last nationwide protest
Yeah.
earlier on in
Yes. Hands off. The hands off.
the hands off?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hands off my Medicare. Hands off everything.
Yes,
Something like that. I
the
think it was
hands off,
something.
and there
Yeah.
was yeah, and then
Something
there
like
was
that.
something else that was actually more specific, but yeah, actually prior to the hands off, it was before, all of the cutting became apparent. But um I think that it like literally will magnify the energies, as people step back and see, wow, we were everywhere. you know
Yes.
we're everywhere. And so, so we have, and it's kind of what indicative of what we've been given to understand is the statistical reality, that these people that are pro um pro these politics represented by Trump are a magnified resourced minority. The majority of the American population is not pro these politics, and there's still a
Hmm.
sizable number of people who stay home. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? Who are
Hmm.
disengaged.
Right.
So, this certainly demonstrates it, certainly demonstrates it. And there's no it's very interesting. It's like you said you wanted this big parade on TV, and you also exposed your unpopularity.
Hmm.
Really kind of interesting in terms of, reading the room, just a total ignorance of what's actually, because the polls are all over the place about the unpopularity, about the critiques, about, how the citizenry is actually responding. But you somehow thought that you could pull off a big fat military parade on your birthday in
Right.
celebration of
That
you, and
just coincidentally happens to be the U.S. Army's birthday, so a little cover.
coincidentally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it seemed to all, fit together so tidily and so magically. But anyway, and there you have it. Folks, and the common denominator, maybe folks that would have come out for the birth of the American military, or, and what have you, Wasn't coming out for you. That's what it was, you know. So
Right.
anyway, and of course, as I said to you before, it's very heartening. It was very heartening seeing all those numbers, seeing all those folks, seeing all the folk
Mm-hmm.
in the street, you know, coming home from the protest, having their little signs, all the
Mm-hmm.
signs kind of different little messages plastered up all
Mm-hmm.
over where I am in Culver City, you know, um, supporting. And what I've seen a lot of, I saw um, posters for, you know, King's Day protests, City Hall, Culver City, or whatnot. But what I saw scrawled and otherwise posted up was F ICE.
Mm-hmm.
That's the message that I saw repeatedly, you know.
Yes.
So yeah, it that message was not lost, and all of this, um, you know, attempting to paint, you know, all of this that is part of the uh, attempt to accelerate these
Mm-hmm.
tensions and create
Mm-hmm.
this civil war
Mm-hmm.
scenario. You know, like everybody's talking this week about trying to create the conditions to invoke martial law and trying to, you know, and all of
Yeah.
this using the people's flags, showing the flags as evidence of a, how they call it, a
An invasion
continued
and
invasion,
an insurrection. And
invasion and insurrection. Well, which is
yes.
it? Which is it? You know,
Yeah.
and
Well, you celebrate actual insurrectionists, both, you know,
it's just, yeah,
of the
yeah,
Confederacy and your most recent, you know,
yeah,
supporters. So,
yeah, yeah, right. And
yeah.
so, for all who can be swayed or shown something, it's there to see plainly. It's plainly there to see. For those who won't be swayed, then, you know, they're
Here's the thing, though.
convinced against
Um,
their will. Yes.
left lefties, whatever their range on the left, and I'm not even talking about liberals, but maybe I should even, you know, say liberals. Um, don't have militias, generally speaking, right? Are
Yeah.
you know, which is not to say there aren't people who have guns or their own kind of arms, because this is the United States, and all kinds of people hunt and have their guns, and you know the.
Hmm.
But you know, it seems you know, less likely have the sort of right wing militias that we know exist. That's
Yes.
been around since certainly since the 70s, and you know just
Right.
continue to grow.
Right.
And you know lefties have not been going around assassinating people um,
No.
or trying to kidnap
No.
sitting governors, and you know the various things that members of the right wing have been doing for a few decades in this country, you know, blowing
Hmm.
up federal buildings.
Hmm.
And so you know, yeah, I'm heartened by the, you know, the turnout also, and you know what an opportunity for organizing. And I'm going to, you know, I'm going to expect that some organizing took place. Not, it wasn't just people marching, but that other, you know, some folks were able to take advantage of that to share their literature, you know, to organize, to promote, you know, the importance of union, etc. um, but I do wonder, as you know, you mentioned, you know, what's the big next one, or what's the next big one, and between these big ones, because there was also, what was it? The same
Hmm.
organization, I think, that organized the hands off. They were doing the 50-51, right? 50
That's what I'm talking
administrations,
about.
50
50,
states,
51. Yes, that's what I'm
which
talking
weren't
about.
the sort of huge, you know, but the whole point is all these little, you know, just protesting everywhere. And those have been, so they continue though, you know, they've been consistent, and they will continue.
Hmm.
Um, and when it is in LA, you know, something you brought up Thursday, right? When it is in LA and primarily brown and black people out there, because these other protests in the little small towns, often with, you know, primarily Euro descended people,
Mm-hmm.
European people, you know, they aren't being militarized in that way, right? They're not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily the police even showing up all the time.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But as they
Yes.
grow, and as they as you know, his unpopularity becomes more apparent.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what's next?
Mm-hmm.
Um, will we see that? And you know, and are people going to be ready for that, or need to start getting ready for that? There was a report. I haven't been able to get clarity on it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
of somebody driving an SUV into one of the
Yeah.
not hands off, one of the No Kings uh,
Yes.
at the end of the demonstration in Northern Virginia, as folks were walking away. But you know, still need to get some clarity on it. Um, and there were, you know, some attempts at some kind of counter demonstration, right? That, you know, so apparently, you know, were more or less shouted down, or you know, unable to disrupt the you know, the demonstrations and marches and protests yesterday. But you know,
Mm-hmm.
even that there were attempts at counter protest indicates that, you know, they're kind of feeling that heat a little bit, um, and we're still early in the conventional term of this regime.
Mm. Right.
The
Right.
amendment to repeal whichever amendment keeps, you know, the president from serving more than 2 terms hasn't been uh, you know, proposed yet, but I'm sure it will be
Yeah.
at some point. To
Yeah.
So we'll see. You know, we'll see what happens with this unpopularity. Um, a declared democratic socialist is doing really well in the mayoral race in New York. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that more
Mm-hmm.
Democrats, for what it's worth, and
Mm-hmm.
it ain't worth much. I mean, let me be clear, right? Have been winning in these special elections and things, but what it demonstrates though is
Yeah.
the unpopularity of
Yeah.
what's happening, right?
Yeah.
And you know, a space to open up to
Yeah.
for some, you know, some kind of genuine left politic, at least to push that. I know that I'm going to draw a blank on her name. The sister in you know, the South Asian sister from Seattle,
Yes.
Kashama, I think, Sawant,
I don't know her name, but I know who you mean. Savant.
um,
That part.
yeah,
Yeah.
is running for national office. I'm not
Okay.
sure which party. I know she's not running as a Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you know, now is that time, right? This might be the space for that. This is,
Yeah.
you know, this may be the moment. Yeah,
Yeah.
Kashama Sawant, you know, to for a working families party, right, to step up, or if it is the only option, to seriously push Democrats to be
Yeah.
democratic socialists,
Mm-hmm.
or to not turn their back on
Mm-hmm.
um, the Roosevelt tradition, if that's the best they could do, right?
Mm-hmm.
On
Mm-hmm.
the New Deal and the Great Society
Mm-hmm.
vision. If
Mm-hmm.
they want to save this, if they really want to try to reform it,
Mm-hmm.
the point being, you know, there should be an opening, right? Because of people being unhappy,
Yeah.
and the opportunity to take advantage of this, and even to point out, why have the Democrats been so feckless?
Absolutely.
You know, because of their and how compromised they are,
Yeah.
um,
Exactly.
you know, with the funding, et cetera, right? In terms of how
Yeah.
this, you know, system is
Yeah.
set up.
Yeah.
And money is free speech.
Yeah. Yeah. It would be great to see what that would look like if folk had a clear had clear alternatives on the ballot to
Mm-hmm.
Democratic Party. You know,
Mm-hmm.
take a little bit of time, a little more conversation, and a little more what recontextualizing of the
Mm-hmm.
contradictions that people are
Mm-hmm.
seeing. You
Mm-hmm.
know, enough time. And I haven't watched Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders. I know people are absolutely flocking to hear what they have to say. I haven't watched to hear what kind of discussion they're having, you know, what their rhetoric is, if their rhetoric is expanding uh you know, kind of a political view, a political sophistication, or if it is just not that, not that. Look at what they're not doing, what they're not doing, and channeling people back to the Democratic Party. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but as you know, as you're saying, this opens up, certainly opens up the space for a greater, more sophisticated discussion and more sophisticated expectation from right the voting public, um,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe an opportunity for a some kind of definite shift. And our good comrade James is in the room.
So let's bring James on. Greetings, James.
Greetings,
Greetings.
James.
Hey,
Hey,
y'all.
Hey.
hey.
You see, I'm in an undisclosed location hiding from the authorities.
Okay, good.
Good. Good. Always wise.
Stay, yes, stay,
Yes.
stay
Are you?
safe.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Stay safe. And we were just, really talking about the news of the week, and the weekend, just to, kind of prep folks for, comments you want to share. Um,
This is, we've been talking about this for years now,
mm-hmm.
really decades now.
Mm-hmm.
This calling the oppression of
Hmm.
Black people, the repression of Black people, fascism,
Mm-hmm.
and authoritarianism and
Mm-hmm.
anti-democracy, even when it was perpetrated by the Democratic Party.
Right.
Uh, False arrests, false convictions, assassinations. This
Mm-hmm.
is nothing new. This is nothing new. Donald Trump is a Johnny come lately to this kind of stuff. When they had in the civil rights movement children on demonstrating and marching, getting arrested en masse, and then marched, run to the jails,
Mm-hmm.
beaten and tortured. Fannie Lou Hamer tortured. Um, Members of the Black Panther Party, members of the Civil Rights Movement,
Mm-hmm.
members of all kinds of resistance,
Mm-hmm.
tortured and murdered. And uh, this uh, Donald Trump, not really giving a damn about government, not really caring about the people, has started to engage in this kind of stuff. Like, this is it's almost like this is all he knows. This is what
Mm-hmm.
he appreciates.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, this uh, this use of violence and force uh, in chasing down, capturing, imprisoning, deporting people, including U.S. citizens.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. And whatever he says, his lackeys do it. I mean, I've just You know, a long time ago, somebody said, you ain't seen nobody Uncle Tom until you seen white people Uncle Tom. And this whole, the cabinet, the Congress, the courts, it's like
Yes.
whatever he says goes.
Yeah.
And they're fostering this, atmosphere of authoritarianism. And it's a small wonder he has not only an authoritarian personality, but he comes from a world, you know, a family business, essentially, where what he says is law.
Right.
I mean, you can see it in his he's a damn reality show host. He has you know, he lines people up, has them do stupid stuff, and then if it's the slightest displeasure, and for really no real apparent reason, he'll you're fired, and people groveling at his feet. You know, if I was a rich and powerful white man, I would be embarrassed.
I don't understand it.
Do you understand that at all? Tasha, do you understand this stuff? It's crazy.
It's crazy. I don't understand it. Yeah, that what is so charismatic about this individual? I mean, he's a clown. He's been one.
Yeah. Yeah. Other than he's
you're muted, Tasha.
All I said was right. He's a clown and he's been one. And there's no one that has known him in his past life. I mean, he's always been kind of a tongue-in-cheek, you know, kind of, oh yeah, Donald Trump. Even in his 80s splash, you know, of cameo appearances representing the rich guy,
right.
You know, and all those kinds of little appearances that he did, and that kind of, you know, it was kind of tongue-in-cheek. And I think that with like at least to my memory, the Trump University debacle and the Trump steaks debacle seem to be like little touchstones of exposure, you know, national. Otherwise, people in New York, you know, knew him to be ridiculous and a fraud and a sham and all these different kinds of things. So yeah, it's all very interesting. Such a perfect storm. I mean, I think there's a perfect storm of situation, of promotion and marketing, of as everybody is saying, white men's wishful thinking, you know, and the way that he is identifiable with that population. He's no more articulate, no more, right. You know what I'm saying? He's accessible. He's like, yeah, I could be him, you know, in some kind of way, you know. I think that contributes to it too. But yeah, it is it's very odd. It's very odd. But hey, what can I say? You know, I know people who I have been close to, and people who have been you know, black thinking, African centered, Afro curious, who are, you know, Trump supporters, and I will give you the whole, you know, run you the whole trope, the set of tropes and the rhetoric, and, you know, and so, hey, I find it very odd.
Yeah, this Machiavellian mindset of, you know, basically, I'm going to smash you down if you don't bow down to me. The whole, which, and again, this isn't new to him, but this whole, I'm a victim. Oh, white people are victims. And it's like people really need to reread Animal Farm in 1984. This is stuff all these traits can be easily identified. And again, not to focus on Donald Trump, but you know, like in my critical thinking class, you can't help but talk about
Right.
because he is the leader of all this mess. Um, oh, there's white genocide in South Africa. You just because you said it doesn't mean, where's the evidence?
Right.
Uh, who's that? Some senator from or representative from Louisiana said
Mike
that.
Johnson,
Yeah, I guess. No, not him.
not the speaker.
No, not the speaker. But there was another one. He said, uh, "White whites are being systemically oppressed." It's like, huh?
Right.
Just
You,
ridiculous.
you are. That is so crazy.
It's so
But
crazy.
and if he believes it, it's like, what kind of weird psychopathic racial personality
Mhm.
disorder does he have to
Mhm.
believe that white men are systemically oppressed
Yes. And
and
that is a
deny the
widespread
oppression
belief.
of black people?
Yep.
You know,
Where
the
does
thing
that go ahead?
I was going to say, in hearing how this, all of these common sense, as Yusuf likes to say, common sense, common knowledge, and common sense notions that we're well aware of, particularly this reverse racism bit. I often get the feeling that, the real folk who have done the real work, like the Heritage Foundations and the Hoover Institutes and and the ilk who create, who do research and do focus groups and do all, kind of crafted the perfect set of talking points to attract a particular group of, to not attract a particular group, but something that leans into the those underlying beliefs among white folk, to get them kind of
Mhm.
between that. And I don't mean it literally, I'm just saying it. I often, it's like, this is like, there's so a great amount of construction in this.
I think it is literal. That they are quite conscious and intentional in putting together those talking points, right? And the frame, and the plan for America that they've been giving to Republican presidents since Reagan, and that there's someplace they also believe it, right? Believe it to be true.
Mm.
Could not fathom, or for them, right? Equal rights means they're being oppressed, right? if you're taking away their privilege,
Yes.
Right.
that's oppression to them. Black power can only
Yeah.
mean white subjugation, right? Because they can only think of it, and we'll say, well, then, well, what about white people's power? They say, well, you
You
can
haven't
only imagine
noticed.
you can only imagine that whoever's in power is going to oppress, right? You can't imagine shared power or actual equal power between nations or communities here in this settler nation. Yeah, delusion is the right word. And it is a mental illness. And right, that's how Fanon approached it as a psychiatrist, and others, right? That this is a mental illness. um, Colonial structures, right, generate these mental illnesses, these delusions. They actually do believe they believe they're oppressed
Yeah.
by their own women for
Yes.
asserting some kind of equality,
Absolutely.
even to be the equal colonizer, right? That's
Mm.
or an equal slaveholder.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the idea that people, this demographic, because it's like you can trace the uh, abandonment of democracy
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
in the thinking of people
Mm.
back to, oh my God, if they get the vote,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
they get the vote,
Mm-hmm.
pretty soon Jackson, Mississippi will be run by black people because they're the
Mm-hmm.
majority there,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
which has happened. A black nationalist, a
Mm-hmm.
revolutionary black nationalist, came
That's right.
into the chief executive's office in
Yes.
Jackson, Mississippi, which would have been unheard of.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But you
Right.
heard the warnings from Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, and all the others back
Mm-hmm.
then. If they are on equal political and social footing, uh, it will mean our demise.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yet in 2025, excuse me, who holds the power in the Congress? Who are the majority in the Congress?
That's right.
And whether uh, the, the Democrat or the Republican, who holds the power? Who holds the power in the White House? Overwhelmingly, since the establishment of
Overwhelming.
this nation. Who holds the power in the Supreme Court and in the courts in general?
Mm-hmm.
They have not been oppressed
They have not
to
been
where they
oppressed.
cannot function. It cannot be in any way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. Any way, shape, or form can it be compared to the oppression
Right.
of the first people, the First Nations people, the people who the people who were left here when Mexico became part of the United States, those parts of
Mm-hmm.
Mexico that became part of the
Mm-hmm.
United States,
Mm-hmm.
to the African people who are here,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
whether um, recent immigrants or uh, coming from
Mm-hmm.
a legacy of slavery.
Mm-hmm.
The economic
Mm-hmm.
structure of this country is in the hands of what I mean of the Fortune 500. How many
Mm-hmm.
people? How many people outside? What demographic outside of white men own the
Right.
Fortune 500?
Yes.
That own the media?
Right.
Yes.
It's ludicrous to think that. And
Mm-hmm.
but you have people again. Excuse me. White men who follow it, white women who follow it, and black men and women who
Yes.
follow, who are just groveling, and so-called Latinos
Mm-hmm.
who follow it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
The indigenous people who follow it,
Mm-hmm.
even as they're being rounded up as Latinos
Yes.
because they look like Latinos, or is it that Latinos look like them, Mexicans look like them, Guatemalans look like them because they
Right.
are them?
Because they
That's
are.
what they are.
Yeah.
But they say, but wait a minute, this was our land before yours, but you're saying it's okay because we're not really citizens? I mean, this all should have been sorted out a long time ago, but it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter because race still plays a big part
Yeah.
Yes.
and power plays a big part.
And
Yes.
just um indisputably, indisputably. But then this question of dispute,
Mm-hmm.
the willful ignorance and the way that folks are able to, I'm not even talking about psychologically, this in these days and times, and as they're talking about information bubbles that algorithms create, as they talk about the post literacy of folk, as we, take into consideration the long term campaigns of white supremacist organizers, multi decade campaigns
Mm-hmm.
who seed these ideas, seed these
Mm-hmm.
notions of white oppression, of who's suffering and why, and all to kind of to they're not just catchphrases and buzz phrases and what have you, but are woven into elaborate uh, uh, elaborate discourse, with their own literature, with their own, all these kinds of things, Um, and James, you might talk a little bit about the Turner Diaries as as a central literature, in this thinking. What I was talking about before you went off for a second was just kind of the long history of these notions. There's nothing new about the notion, certainly that Dr. Welsing described and theorized and created a theoretical framework. There's nothing new about, this notion of European descendant people being obliterated through the mixture with, non-European people, and all of these myths of genetic purity and whatnot that even predate eugenics thinking and whatnot, comes out of something even more profound. But all these kinds of notions that have been systematically perpetuated and embellished and circulated in white supremacist circles. And so now they're just more, they've did a little bit more mainstreaming, right? But and so here we are, and so people are, oh, the great replacement theory or whatnot. This is very old. This is not new, and that is that's worth understanding. But James, the reason why I referred to the Turner Diaries was some of the pieces that are talked about in terms of those stories, in terms of creating models and for and like embodiments, creating a dramatization for some of these white what paranoias, certain kinds of, or whatever their underlying racial animus is what I'm talking about, particularly around interracial coupling and what have you. I don't know, whatever you might have to say about that in any of these things.
You're muted, James. You're still muted.
Muted.
You see the menu down at the bottom? Or actually, you should be able to find it on your box too. There you go. Oh, no, you're still muted. It's still showing muted. You see.
Okay.
Oh, there you go. You're good.
Yeah, this is what happens when you go between platforms and you can't figure
Right.
out what's going on. Yeah, the Turner Diaries is, some white nationalist fantasies of purifying America. Yeah, a neo-Nazi piece of work, I think written by a guy named Pierce, who was head of a neo-Nazi organization, and decided to put his dreams in a book.
Mm-hmm.
And consisted of mass killings, again, the laying the framework for white paramilitaries to do things. And again, we've talked in the past about this in terms of the white right rising up, and but their thing, as much terror as they can bring. Like just recently, this thing called the base. These racist, fascist right wingers coming together to talk about what they're going to do to establish a war front against both the state and the people of color, Black people especially, Jews especially, brown people especially. What's going to be done? How can they implement this war footing? But of course, their power is dwarfed by the power of the United States.
Right.
Where you have white nationalists like what's his name, Stephen, the the light bulb head dude, Stephen Miller from Santa Monica High, who was angry because there weren't enough janitors to pick up the trash he would throw, who pushed again the end of DEI, the end of affirmative action, who is a fascist, even though he's a Jew. He hates. He's one of those. He would be one of those Jewish guys, that comes about every now and then, who winds up committing suicide because they're caught as part of a Klan or Nazi organization. But he's in government, and he's the one provoking ICE to chase people down in fields, to ram cars with little kids in them. That whole energy he puts out, who has the Secretary of Homeland Security tackling a U.S. Senator, Alex Padilla, some of the most ridiculous fascistic dreams. It's like, when did you think it was okay? And then straight out lie, the great lie.
Yeah.
Again, Donald Trump is a liar. Kristi Noem is a liar. Stephen Miller is a liar.
Yep.
They just lie. I mean,
they just lie.
They just lie.
Kristi Noem is talking about, well, when he rushed the stage, we didn't know who he was. He didn't identify himself.
Come on.
I mean, look at the tape.
Did you see shameless?
And then when they push him to the ground, and they say, and when he told us who he was, he wasn't handcuffed. We let him go. Yeah, you forced him to his knees. You put him on his face on the ground. You handcuffed him. But for those people who are engaged in cognitive dissonance, they don't want to hear it. And you're just lying. That's a liberal lie. You're libtards, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just regurgitating the same lies of Donald Trump and Stephen Miller and Kristi Noem and the rest of them.
Yes.
And it's just very difficult to fight. It's very difficult to fight, but it has to be fought. Again, what I don't know how many times I've said this with you guys, and I know you said it, but tell no lies, expose lies wherever they're told. I mean, that's a full-time job.
Yes,
They're
it is.
put out your position because they lie so much.
All the time. All the time.
And you got to fight those people, like you said, those black folks who are down.
That's
who
right.
Supposed to be, I'm down with Trump. Why? Because he's winning.
Right.
This whole farce of a military parade. I mean, I don't know if you watched it, but I didn't watch it yesterday, but I watched some of it today. And the soldiers, he wants to emulate, North Korea and Russia. He wants people goose stepping and that precision. And they showed these U.S. soldiers, and they were like, "Why the hell am I here?" And they're just look like they're out for a walk. There's no precision. There's no everybody in lockstep. There's none of that. They're not feeling it. That's not what they do.
That's
warfare
not what
for
they
the
do.
United States. Since Vietnam, but even since World War II, has been largely consisted of bombing the hell out of somebody.
Right.
Whether by firebomb, bunker busters, whatever. Carpet bombing, Cambodia and Laos and Vietnam. Carpet bombing by the good General Colin Powell. Chasing the Iraqis out of Kuwait, block them from the front, block them from the back, and carpet bomb all of them, and just massacre thousands of people. This is what happened. This is what's happening in Gaza, or what has happened in Gaza. With Israel, and it's this type of warfare that's now going to be fought with drones.
Mm-hmm.
Drones,
Mhm.
bombers, huge, again, you drop a bomb into the middle of a building, it goes to the basement, blows it up, and brings the entire building down. Missiles that destroy entire blocks. This is the type of warfare. It is not the soldiers marching in
Right.
lockstep.
Mm.
That's not modern warfare. Modern warfare is somebody in Nebraska or California or
Mm-hmm.
controlling
Right.
some drones that fly into a certain location and blow it up.
Mm-hmm.
Even Israel, they had
Hmm.
sent people into Iran,
Hmm.
supposedly, to buy these nuclear sites and set up close. They're not engaged in hand-to-hand combat.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
not
No.
marching into Iran.
Mhm.
They're throwing missiles and they're
Mhm.
dropping bombs from jets. And
Mm-hmm.
when has the United States sent hundreds of thousands of troops in? They didn't do
Mhm.
it in the war in Iraq.
Yeah.
You know, they have proxies in Libya and other places. It's ridiculous. And the so-called president fantasizing, I'm sure in his mind, he had, oh yeah, we're going to show we're the biggest and the baddest. And I could see militaries around the world. It's like, these people, this is a joke.
This is a joke.
They're dragging their feet,
Exactly.
and they're not. They ain't nobody in lockstep. They don't look disciplined.
Nobody in lockstep. That's right.
The
Empty
most
stand.
disciplined, the most
Mhm.
disciplined people in that parade that I saw was the ROTC, because they had
Mm-hmm.
their person yelling
Wow.
at them, talking about to the left, all
Right.
that.
That's right.
And
The
their
ROTC.
ROTC. Right. Uh-huh.
Yes.
So his little fantasy, and I don't know if you've seen the video of him, look like he's about to cry.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
he's hurt.
Everyone
He's
has
hurt.
said the same thing. Looks like he's
Yeah,
He's
I mean,
about to
he
cry.
is hurt. It is
Don't
such a
nobody want
pleasure
to
to
see.
watch.
Yeah, don't nobody want to see that this little parade that you put on for your benefit.
For your benefit.
Even the people who were sitting up there for hours and hours. It's like they don't. He's having a good time. Well, he should have been having a good
should have
time, but then
been.
nobody came out to his birthday. He's like, you have a birthday, you send out a bunch of invitations for a birthday
Yeah.
party, and don't nobody
Yeah.
come.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
because he's looking hurt, and it was a hurt little parade.
Yeah. Yeah. We were hoping for rain. There was
We
a
were.
weather report.
We
There
were,
was a
yes.
weather report that said it was like imminent, and if it could have literally rained on
Oh, it would
his
have been great.
parade, that
Yes,
would have been it.
And
Very
lightning.
cold.
and lightning. That's
Oh,
right.
lightning, some thunder, some right. That would have been fabulous.
Yes,
But
just perfect.
right.
Yeah. But
What do I want to go ahead?
No. But again, you have the fascism or the potential of terrorism and race war coming from the right.
Yeah.
Internally, and then you have the U.S. government acting like terrorists, acting
Right.
like
Of course.
they all went to the school of the Americas and learned how to
Mhm.
torture. And like during the war in Iraq, we were like, oh wow, Abu Ghraib is like these people learning torture techniques. Well,
Mhm.
they taught torture techniques in the school of the Americas.
They
The
taught you how to torture.
the dirty wars in Guatemala and El Salvador, where they're trying to send people now. The whole birth of MS-13 comes out of the war against the oligarchy and fascism in El Salvador, and those things now. Well, that's Abu Ghraib and Gitmo, Occupy Cuba, Guantanamo Bay. Those lessons that the United States was teaching other people and were being practiced, especially in places like Chicago, the
Yep.
Area 7, the tortures, that ended the death penalty because you can't rely on the death penalty. A Republican governor that said you can't rely on it because people have been tortured into confessions. What happened in New York, what happened in New Orleans with the people who ultimately became the San Francisco Eight, who were tortured with cattle prods. What do you call it? When they're dripping water into their face.
Oh yeah, the waterboarding thing.
Yeah, waterboarding, sticking pins into their penis, cattle prods in their groin and underarm. All this kind of tortuous manipulations, solitary confinement, which is now widespread. Again, a lot of it pioneered in California and spread across the nation into the federal system. These things are being used against people who have simply been accused of membership in MS-13, which is essentially a U.S. creation.
Which is essentially a U.S. creation. Yeah.
Would you all elaborate on that at some point? Elaborate on that a bit about MS-13 after you make your points and whatnot, but a little more discussion of that would be great.
Yeah. The idea that what's her name? Christy Nome, I think. Was it Christy Nome?
Yeah.
And they said, do you know what the due process is? They said, yeah, it means that the president doesn't have to give trial.
Right.
Doesn't have to. It was like, are you stupid?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. Either you were stupid or are you a liar?
You're like, yes.
And it could be both.
You can go for A, A, because, you ask, just throwing this in, you ask a room full of graduating seniors about due process, a room full of graduating seniors who have attempted to follow a year in discussing government and what have you. There's no concept of what these basic rights, civil rights are, the basis of them, and what links into what. There's no concept. So dumb as she may be, she's as dumb as the rest of us, systematically uninformed about any of this. So with this army of loyalists, what you say is what is true, and the tendency to just accept without question what an authority figure has to say. I mean, is there a reason for them to question it? So yeah, I
yeah, but do you actually believe she spent however many years as the governor of South Dakota, not knowing what due process is as governor of South Dakota?
Yes.
I don't know. I think it's possible.
I mean, I find it hard to believe just because she would have to deal with an attorney general, and it would have to have come up, right, in her. And so that's why I say B. She's just lying.
Okay.
She's just lying. It is. Well, it's not inconceivable, but it's just highly unlikely, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. But we don't know. So I don't know that she's just a complete idiot,
right?
And it may be she's just a liar, or some combination of the two.
Yeah.
So,
because the court?
Yeah.
By the way, speaking of Christy Nome, does anyone know why she is not welcome on the reservations in South Dakota? Because I know that at least one of the First Nations are like, you do not step foot on this reservation, right? She did something to alienate one of the First Nations in South Dakota. But I don't know what. I have no idea what it is.
Let me see if I can find that out if no one.
Yeah, I think I knew that answer. But I can't remember.
Yeah, and isn't MS-13 related to deciding to deport Salvadorans, here in the States who would become gang members and just deport them to Salvador where they reorganize, and then you get the gang problem that burgeons in at least in San Salvador, if not the whole country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were people who were in Los Angeles became a gang and associating with the Mexican mafia,
Mm-hmm.
and then people being deported, going back into El Salvador, and spreading. Just like you got Crips all over the United States. There are people trying to save their people in Los Angeles trying to save their children by exporting them to Rancho Cucamonga or Pomona, or somewhere in the Antelope Valley, and all they do is carry the gang with them. And so you got kitchen Crips in Kansas. Whoever knows where else, in Bloods in New York,
right?
Just Crips and Bloods all over the place, manifesting, and so the extreme brutality of the war in El Salvador. Again, the death squads that were financed and pushed by the Salvadorian government, it inflicted such brutality, and there were such so many deaths. You go outside, there are bodies in the street,
and their bodies,
and then they flee,
mass graves and whatnot.
They're running to the United States, which I'd never really understood. I mean, other than you could probably make a living here easier than some other places, but then getting pushed back, and this back and forth, and this economic deprivation, this exposure to brutality, because the United States wanted to maintain El Salvador as communist free,
right?
And the United States has always been willing to, has always preferred brutal, murderous dictatorships over any kind of socialist
Here
system.
it is.
Always. Whether it's El Salvador, Haiti, Chile, they, these right wingers run around pictures of prisoners, political prisoners, being thrown out of helicopters,
right?
Taken from Chile on their chest, and very proud. We'd rather be with a genocidalist, a fascist, human rights denying regime than have some kind of economic system. Salvador Allende being overthrown. Hugo Chavez facing
right.
The Shah, the Iran, the government being overthrown. The Grenada, the government of Grenada being overthrown.
A million people killed, a million communists killed in Indonesia.
Yes, all of that. A million people killed in Vietnam. They're talking during the parade. They were talking about when the North invaded North Korea invaded South Korea. Well, why are there two Koreas?
Why are there two Koreas? Thank you.
Why does everything have to be cut in half? Why is there East and West Germany?
Right.
Because you can't stand the idea of a socialist system.
Mm-hmm.
And you would rather see people die en masse. You would rather see millions of people die in Congo.
Absolutely.
Right.
In the 19th century. Millions die in the 20th century. And millions dying in the 21st century is acceptable because you want access to those minerals.
And to no benefit of the local people.
To no benefit of the people of Congo. Not the Congo, but Congo.
But Congo, yes.
And it's been so often said in these past few weeks, not only in these past few weeks, but you hear it a lot in these past few weeks. Cruelty for cruelty's sake, the
Mhm.
lust for cruelty. You know, is it even in all of these various situations? It might even be more politically expedient to to have some democratic space in some places, to be able to have, what I'm saying? It might even be more than to engender and seed all of this animosity, resentment. You put people have no other choice but to resist you, you
Right.
know,
Mm-hmm.
but
Right.
to, right, but to revolutionize, but to, so, there is some kind of cultural component to this that, um, uh, what is it? Obscures,
Mhm.
you know, um, even solutions that might be more efficient or manageable to allow
Right.
you, what I'm saying, more what is the word? Uh Pacifying.
Mhm.
You might be able to, you know,
That,
extract a campaign of some kind of apparent democratic,
right.
option. You might be able to more easily and for longer term with less issues extract, or but
Right.
anyway, this bloodlust,
Mm-hmm.
That's an important. It's an important fascist aesthetic, right? To appear strong, to perform strength, and um, to not pacify, but to crush. Right? I mean, that is very much the fascist values,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
And aesthetic is,
mhm,
no opposition. Right? The opposition is
mhm,
the enemy. The opposition is the poison that has to be extracted, and that's the language they use, right? And that's the language
Mm-hmm.
this regime has been using. So
mhm,
yeah, you're right, right? Because it's only going to produce more resistance, right? I mean, we knew it's because the federal troops were sent in, because they were
mhm,
deploying the Marines, that the resistance heightened in Los Angeles. They were real clear on that. But yeah, that's it. The optics matter, and especially for this TV show administration. They got to look the part. That's why yesterday was such a failure, because the parade did not look the part,
mm-mm,
Right.
mm-mm,
Yeah.
mm-mm,
and that
And
mm-mm.
aesthetic matters to fascists.
Yeah.
yes. And the whole idea that, oh, we're going to be we want to do away with DEI, and we're only going to go on merit. You mean like going to Fox TV
Right.
to get all of your people, to get your defense secretary, to get the attorney general for DC, to
Mm-hmm.
to uh, the secretary of defense? Why are you
Mm-hmm.
going to television, especially
Right.
a drunkard, an alcoholic? I won't call him a drunkard. I'll call him an alcoholic
Mhm,
who
mhm,
has only gone so far. Is this the best? You know that song. Is this the best you
Right.
can honestly do?
mhm,
Is
mhm,
Pete Hegseth?
Right.
mhm, mhm,
Is
mhm,
who? I mean, really, you think he's worthy? That he merits being promoted to the highest military position in the
Right.
United States outside of the president? What experience
inherently.
does he have? What training does he have? What education does he have that would qualify him for that?
Thank you.
It's
Any of them.
and I think in our conversations when we're opposing these, uh,
Mhm.
the madness that they put out there,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah.
like asking those basic questions and not
Yes.
Questions.
just be led by them.
Yes.
Very
Exactly.
What
important.
what merit? It's like, so if you
Yeah.
don't want DEI in the schools, so you must not want legacy admissions,
Right.
Exactly.
Exactly.
because that has nothing to do with merit. Just like,
That has
what's his
nothing to
name,
do with
George
me.
Bush, George
Mm-hmm.
W.
Right.
Bush.
George W.
How
Right.
did he get? How did he get into Yale? He's a
Right.
C student.
Right.
How did
Mm-hmm.
he get into Yale? Because his
Mhm.
daddy went. So
Legacy.
we're
Mhm.
going to eliminate all that crazy stuff. We're going
Yeah.
to eliminate the donor. Somebody donates $10 million to
Hmm.
SC or
Right.
UCLA. Does that mean you
Hmm.
don't consider them any differently than somebody coming out of a regular school because their parent
Right.
donated $10 million?
Hmm.
Right.
Where's the merit in that?
Yeah. And
And we
these
have
are the questions. Right. Go ahead. Yeah.
no. Go ahead.
No, what you just said, these are the questions to be prepared to circulate, to be able to prepare to raise when these
Hmm.
conversations arise. And they do. They arise more and more with people in the street, people spontaneously, in one's comings and goings. I've certainly seen it,
Hmm.
in schools, shoot, in grocery stores. And you know what I mean? People are bursting at the seams to process all of this. And yeah, these spontaneous conversations are happening. And I very much wonder, and this, anyway, just to arrest it there, that is, what, these kind of seed ideas that need to be promoted, that need to be inserted. Because like the seat of authority, I was sitting here listening to you guys talk, seat of authority is like an invisibility cloak. You remember, like in those cartoons, and like, what, now that you can put on the thing and you are invisible, so you can sit in the seat of authority and all of your ridiculousness and weaknesses, and somehow they're invisibilized to folk just
Yeah.
because you are sitting where you are sitting. You know what I mean? They start trying to make sense of nonsense, start trying to, and legitimize you. You become legitimate just because of where you're sitting. I mean, I think it's fair to say that with more and more, all but the cultists, the MAGA cultists, of which too many of us are a part of, unfortunately. But it seems like, you know, um, there's a lot of tarnish, a lot of tarnish is happening. And I guess those numbers, because they certainly should have been able to pull more numbers to his birthday and his military parade and whatnot.
Mhm.
That indicates, not only kind of like that demographic reality of them being a minority political voice, but maybe, and quite a bit of fall off, quite a bit of fall off,
Mhm.
disenchantment, you know.
Y-
Well, the
Yeah, but
people
they
who are
he
positioned to remove that cloak of invisibility aren't asking those questions in press conferences and whatnot. Again, some of these most basic questions. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what happened to some of these senators, Democratic senators, during the confirmation hearings. Asking just some of these basic, what makes you qualify? In what way do you merit this position? And they're also, stacking the presidential press room, right? There, a lot of
Mm,
the more experienced journalists and aren't being allowed in, and you're getting some of the like young podcaster types, YouTube types, social media, who are asking silly
yes.
sort of what is it, TMZ type questions, or whatever, Access Hollywood type questions. And
I was about to say don't TMZ is ultra tough compared to some of these people.
actually, yeah, well, I thought about when I
They've
said
got
it,
a
that
little
actually
bit
they've actually
over here.
asked some hard questions, right?
Yes,
Entertainment Tonight.
Yeah, exactly.
yes,
But that's
yes.
what we're getting, right? The folks who should ask those, because they are very basic questions,
Hmm.
and they're not getting asked by the people who have access. So we could hear those answers
Yeah,
from people in this administration, or when they do get asked, they deflect in some kind of way.
absolutely.
Like, so I don't know
Absolutely.
what
But even
qualifies, what's her name, McMahon, to be Department
Yes.
of
yes,
Secretary of
Yes.
Education.
Yes.
she
And that
it's for I'm sorry for like her. It's almost like what's 5 times 5? I have to get back
I'll
to
get
you.
back
I'll have
to you
get
on
back
that.
to you. Right,
Let me look into that. I haven't been over through everything.
Yeah, see, yeah,
I don't know that
that
yet.
that drill.
I'm going to do
That's
my
right.
homework. And this kind of, it's so interesting how, what is the word? How, I don't know what the word is that I need here, but it's this kind of when faced with direct questions, substantial questions, the whole rhetorical playbook of
Yeah.
deflection and going into these
Reflection,
tantrums and these hyper
ad
emotionals and all
hominem
these,
attacks. Yeah.
what we're talking about and what's going on here, and just really tapping into I think positionings that are acceptable to people, in general, that makes sense to people in general, who in their common lives might have similar things. Well, I don't know all of that yet. I haven't done the homework yet. I got to do I have to look at it, and then I can get back to the question, so someone is sitting out there saying, well, that makes sense. So what? She doesn't, stop pressuring her, without a sense of, no, the person assuming this position is supposed to come in with, we should be able to assume,
You should know that already, right? This is right.
expertise.
So
You're
you
supposed
can't
to
Why
go
don't
in
you
and
know?
prepare.
expertise.
Right. Yeah.
Just
Mhm.
learn as you go. It's not supposed to be,
It's
but
not supposed to be, right.
there's plenty of people, I think, in the audience who kind of identify with that as an acceptable state, as a common state of being. Maybe someone doesn't have all the answers. Doesn't make them a bad person. Doesn't mean they won't get the answers. So, what's all the the outcry about, or what's all the tension about? You're just picking on them. You're just picking on Trump.
Yeah, I think that's that cultist base, though, right? I don't think that's the general population. Just judging by the turnout yesterday, right? And
Yes.
the unpopularity of these folks, and more than 2/3 of those polled didn't want the military parade, but all you need is that 30% base to continue to run interference and argue your case for you in the barbershop and things like that.
And I also think that that's also been going on. I think that the Doge shit and the clear attack on social services that these people depend on is when they began to draw away, because they've been using these kinds of rhetorical devices. That's what's been getting them through. They've been doing these deflection games and these, this mock outrage and all of these kinds of devices, dramatic devices, all the way through. What seemed to have changed was, this is going to hurt me. I can see the hurt coming.
And I think that particular defection you described, well, let me get back to you on that, right? I don't think people are, I think there is a sense out there, well, you should know. You're the secretary of whatever, right? You should know that. But that it's those other kinds of like the attack, right? The attack the questioner, right? Attack their integrity. Accuse them of of being a part of some culture, or living, creating a fantasy or a lie, or the one we see the most is the press secretary, right? Carolyn Levitt, who had the nerve, the sister who asked the question the other day about, will the president support peaceful protest, and just straight up insultingly, that's a stupid question, and moves on, right? Seeing that tactic more often, which also plays to their base. Right?
Well, that's a nasty question.
Right.
Exactly.
I won't even dignify that with a response.
Yeah. Where are you with ABC? Right? Yeah.
Right. Really, really just horrible reporting. It really should be illegal. That they're
but it's not
terrible.
But even in like when Jasmine Crockett was verbally sparring with this Republican from Louisiana,
Right.
I was so disappointed, and I felt, oh, I need to sit down and make a list of when you talk about Black oppression, because she mentioned some things, but it's like, come on now, you can go deeper than that. You can go with something more firm than that. You can go with the Dred Scott decision, and how it basically the Dred Scott decision before the Dred Scott decision. Black people had no rights that whites were bound to respect. The immigration policy of the United States till the mid 20th century, prohibiting immigration other than from white European countries. Just you can go down and talk about systemic anti-blackness and racism, not just the stuff that that we look at and easily recognize, but they have to acknowledge.
Right.
Like I said, I always go back to what's her name, the who ran for president, the Indian former ambassador to the United Nations,
Nikki Haley.
Nikki Haley talking about the United States was never a white racist country.
Right.
A racist country.
Yeah.
And it's like, how again, are you stupid, or do you think we're stupid to believe that madness? But do we have at our fingertips, at the tip of our brain, somebody like me who's like, oh, I need to look at that list again. Because it is in print, black letter law. Negroes can't vote. Negroes can't move into certain neighborhoods. Negroes can't have certain jobs. Negroes at the United States federal government was segregated.
That's right.
Black people couldn't hold positions, but black people couldn't even fight to kill for the United States until they were ready. It's like every war, World War I, World War II, the Spanish-American War, the Civil War, War of 1812. It's like, we're not going to let black people fight until we have to let black people fight. And then now that we have to let black people fight, we give them guns but as soon as it's done, give them guns back. We don't want you killing us. And you are back in the same oppressed state.
And don't forget it.
We have to have that at our fingertips, because I'm talking to my students. I'm sure you all are talking to your students and those people who happen to be listening to this around them. Know people, if not yourself, people do not understand what a white supremacist state looks like, and all they have to do is look at the history of the United States, which is why these people are trying to erase it.
Which is why they're trying to erase it.
Precisely.
It is there in black and white. It is there in law.
And it's just simple. It's simple and self-evident.
It's
read it. There it is.
Wasn't there a case in the beginning of the 20th century where a South Asian man tried to be categorized as white, and they said no.
And they said, hell no, you're not the kind of Aryan we're talking about.
Somewhere.
They said, hell no.
It's just the
you're not what we meant, sir.
The sheer madness of making a statement like that. You lose all credibility, right?
He said, well, you aren't black, but you damn sure ain't white.
Right.
You are not from a European country.
You are not from a European country.
You don't have
the myth of the Aryans.
You are not Nordic. You better sit down with that dark skinned Caucasian.
Right. Okay.
Sit down.
All right.
Not Nordic, Germanic,
and they have latched on.
None of them. You ain't even Celtic.
Like they have latched on to that, like we've latched on to our whatever percentage of white ancestry, or was it Zora Neale Hurston that said, I'm the only Negro in America whose grandfather isn't full-blooded Cherokee? They've latched on to that. A little boy told me, I will never forget, I was in 6th grade, a little Indian boy had come to the school, right? In fact, I'm thinking about he may have even been Sikh. He may not even have been Hindu. But in any way, whatever else he was, I remember him having the discussion with me because he was darker skinned than me, that his dark skin did not make him black, that he was Caucasian. You know what I'm saying? So
Mm-hmm.
we had that discussion in 1979. You know what
Oh
I'm
yeah,
saying?
well,
As a sixth grader. So this is the dinner table conversation to a
Mm-hmm.
oh yes,
paradigm that was set up in what, in sometime in the 1800s. You know what I'm saying?
oh
As
yeah.
a
Before then, it was before then.
so um yeah, they have a lot of wishful thinking in
That's
latching on to
exactly
that
it. A lot of wishful
sharing that
thinking,
Aryan identity.
Well,
a lot of
the same with
mythology.
the same with uh, our Chicano brothers and sisters who many say, "Oh yeah, my
Castellano,
grandmother came from Spain."
It
Castilian.
I
was
said, if I
Spanish.
had a quarter, I could buy an Escalade. For every time I heard, I was like, are there any women left
Right,
in Spain? Because it
right.
appears they all came to Mexico.
They all
No,
Well,
Negroes and Indians, Mexicans and
man,
Spanish. This is so crazy.
it's
But
crazy.
yeah.
that's uh, meanwhile we have people trying to reverse that. Thank goodness. Again,
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
the Samoans and
Mm-hmm.
Tongans. It's like we're black.
Mm-hmm.
We're black. Whatever else you say, we're black.
Whatever else.
Stop trying to be something else. You're
Yes.
black.
Right.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
you
That's right.
got again this reclaiming the nopal de cara.
Mm.
It's like you have the cactus in your face,
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
meaning you
mm,
look indigenous, Mexican. And
love it.
so I'm talking about what is it? And nopal de cabeza. So like you have a cactus head,
Catch his head. Okay.
and they are. Look it up, man. The videos are hilarious. And you say you thought black people were insecure and self-hating.
Oh, I
Please.
got to look that up. Yeah, I will definitely,
Yes.
definitely
Nopal
look
de
that up.
I mean, it's all the
and
same sickness. It's all the
And it's
same
yeah, right, and it is
yeah, white
global.
supremacy.
but it
You
Yes.
is
got
quite, yes, yes. And
yeah.
similarly, in my early years, in my high school years, someone else that I went through school with, who was Chinese, but I remember this was like we graduating from high school, right? We went through the same school system, graduating from high school, and she was telling me about bananas. She said, yeah, they're white on the inside and yellow on the outside.
Right.
This is high school. So all of these kinds of contradictions are well known. And it really is, it makes for a good expose, setting them side by side, setting all the tropes side by side, because all the men are after the white women. They're
Right.
all
Right.
trying
Right.
to rape
Right.
the white women,
Exactly.
seduce, otherwise manipulate, all these kinds of things. And anyway, we tell some very
Yeah.
similar stories.
Oh yeah.
Some years back, maybe it's been, oh shoot, it might be as many as 15 years now. There was a play that was going around, at least going around LA, might have gone around the country, co-written, and I'm gonna use the language of the play because this was the title of the play, Nigger Spick Chink, and was co-written by a brother.
Right.
I think the Latinx brother from who was from I think it was from his family was from Ecuador if I remember correctly. Brown
Mm-hmm.
and the Filipino writer, right? And but they basically told those stories of
Mm-hmm.
those identity crises. They had to go to all the various individual stories, the encounter with the white other, etc. Right?
Yeah.
And the stories we share, right, about
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
that that the madness, right, the mental instability, identity crisis that white supremacy invokes in so many of us at some point, often in life, unless we are very, very fortunate. Because they have set themselves up as the norm and the standard.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
It's really good play. It's basically a 3-man play. They do monologues, they do scenes together, and it talks just to that, right? The commonality
Yes.
of that
Yes.
experience.
Yes. Yes. Important to understand. And, really that the part of this crisis is that is getting neutralized, because the more we seek ourselves, the more we find each other on on ground that is not tainted, you know,
Mm-hmm.
by the by the white by the white aspiration, by that aspiration for proximity. The more we're pursuing our own cultures and uplifting, and taking them seriously, and letting go of the notion that there are no other legitimate cultures beside European cultures and European derived cultures, and we,
Right.
are actually getting into those, stepping back and getting into those explorations, and
Mm-hmm.
moreover taking up, one of the main ways we do this, like in a practical sense, is taking up the culture, learning up the culture, taking up the spiritual practices and culture, what I mean, all of this kinds of
Mm-hmm.
things, and rediscovering these
Right.
viable cultural systems. And it's, that displaces all of those, it displaces
Mm-hmm.
those years of investment in conditioning us to,
Mm-hmm.
exalt. I mean, and it's something that's what moving in historical dimensions so clearly. There's
Mm-hmm.
just the fact that we are as improminent with it as we are. Like James, the so many years ago, the program that was done at Cielo, at Skyris Space,
Mhm.
and there's a brother there that we met, Kuko, who actually, Kuko, and he did Azteca. He
Right.
did Azteca, he did danza, right? He
Uh-huh.
did
Mhm.
Aztec dancing, and you talked about some of the Ifa traditions and some of the, symbolism in that, and there was a very rich exchange, um, based on that. Actually, we had Kuko in with a brother who is a repatriate Ifa priest, Baba Femi, over at the FIBA Center, and they had an extended conversation, about comparing similarities in approach and symbolisms even, and what have you. And so, that's an issue. The time is up, but before, the jig is up in terms of the this notion that there's no other way to be on this planet
Right.
but the way they've, the way they have invented and devised. But I did want to ask at some point, whenever you get to it, in terms of the accelerationist vibe in this militarization, and just, kind of also in the context, of a Stephen Miller, of these militia groups, of this kind of, trying to uh get this civil war on. What do you see in that, whenever you want to address it?
Well, now is a good time to address it because
Okay.
we're almost 2 hours in.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, see, we're supposed to be an hour now.
We're
See,
supposed to
Right,
be an
right.
hour,
Well, you've
so
been about
maybe
it,
we can
yeah.
do that another time. Maybe we can do that another
no, we
time.
can.
Yeah.
I can address it really, really quick right now. At least in a truncated form.
Yeah.
Is that as as you know, and y'all know what I'm going to say. We need to get prepared.
Mm-hmm.
That's the bottom line. Can't figure out what they're going to do, and
Right.
and that's why I think back of our discussions about what Trump and how to handle Trump. I don't know because he doesn't. There is no real legal means other than taking him to court.
Right.
They have a unified government between the executive and the legislative, and the court is the only thing that can stop him. And apparently, he doesn't give a damn about the court.
Exactly.
So when these um, white supremacists, these terrorists want to run through the community and raise havoc, who's going to stop them? And really, I don't think it's going to be anybody but us, at least initially. If they're going to want to come through shooting, we need to be like Robert F. Williams. We need to be like Deacons for Defense and Justice. We need to be like the Black Panther Party, and whoever else will stand and or slide behind a phone pole and make sure that they don't go past a certain line. That there needs to be intelligence. There needs to be education. People cannot be fooled, because there are people in the community, as what happened in Leimert Park some time ago. I forgot what they were called, but Black folks collaborating with these white right-wingers at Leimert Park.
Yeah.
And it's like, because they're so-called anti-immigrant. And they say, when they're chasing people through those fields, what did that bring to mind?
Right.
And when
anything,
these when they are talking about protecting white heritage and the heritage of the United States, and opposing those who oppose the government and oppose the president, who is that? Who are they talking about? And if you don't think they're talking about you, even your presence, even if you've put it in and you wear a MAGA hat and you wear even if you're anti-MAGA and you just wear an American flag, you think that's going to stop them from messing with you?
Right.
You're deluded.
You're deluded.
No, we need to get ready. That's it. We need to educate ourselves, educate others, and get ready.
Get ready.
On
Get
all
organized.
levels.
Get ready.
which sounds like the summary statement.
Yeah, get ready.
And add our 2 hours.
Yeah.
Before we so let me ask one little other question. You got any comments on the demonstrations here in LA that have been happening?
Who, me? No.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to watch the demonstrations. Although at the very end, they started their little jackbooted. We're gonna clear them out, get some batting practice in, and start throwing flashbangs and tear gas and running people over with horses,
right?
All that kind of stuff. So I didn't get to see them, although I do understand there were over 2,000 demonstrations around the country.
Yeah. There were over
2,000 and maybe up to a million or more people.
Yes.
Which again, and then if you look at that sad and pitiful parade,
that might have got 20,000
maybe
altogether, including the people who actually couldn't see the parade but showed up.
Yes, but when does fascism care about numbers? They are anti-numbers. They're anti-democracy.
Exactly.
So,
and in fact, it was reported that an order was given to the Park Service or wherever, the national parks, don't do a count, right? Don't do a count at the military parade. And you know how much crowd size means to Trump. So they already anticipated and say, no, don't do a count this time around. So any numbers they provide, they're making up for sure.
Yeah, but there's aerial photos, and somebody can come up with a count.
Yep.
Not that he cares.
I'm sure somebody's working on it already. I'm sure somebody's AI has already done the calculations.
So I'm happy to see that the demonstrations are happening. My family in Arizona, we all came from LA, but my family in Arizona is like, so is LA burning or what? Like, or what? It's not burning. I used to work at the federal courthouse on Main Street, Spring Street, Spring and Main. And if I was in my office on the 15th floor, I could have seen 90% of the action.
Mm-hmm.
So no, it is not in Westwood. It's not in Watts. It is not in Inglewood. It is not in Bel Air. It is not in San Pedro. It is not in Mid City. It is not in Fairfax. It was in about essentially 4 square blocks.
4 square blocks.
And the freeway.
That's within that 4 square blocks.
Yeah. So I watched the Fox News report, and they say, "Oh my God!" They're saying that we're replaying the same cars burning, but that happened. But if you play it every day, you think it's 5 different cars.
Exactly.
It's not 5 different cars. It's the same 5 cars.
It's the same 5 cars.
Right.
What the hell?
And that is the language they're using. What did Speaker Johnson say the other day? Because he, trying to support Trump's decisions. Well, they have a tendency in LA for those things to get out of hand. So we're trying. Yeah. We need to be preemptive. So, okay. All right. Yeah.
LA is a trendsetter now.
Yes,
no doubt about that.
Yes, it is.
Whether it's Watts 65, LA 92, the movement for peace in the streets that has spread. All these things have spread, and I could see where they would be worried about that. But to send the Marines in for 4 square blocks? Are you stupid?
Send the Marines in for 4 square blocks.
That's just trying to get it off. Just trying to get it.
Stepped
off.
Right, and confirm their story. Right, it's so serious. You need the Marines to come in.
Right.
Yeah. No, you don't.
And every other word is chaotic.
And every other word is chaotic. Exactly, and out of control. And we've saved LA, right?
Oh my God. Oh my God.
But hey, they're sticking to the playbook, right? You don't admit weakness, you don't give ground. You got to lie, and your ends justifies your lies. And
right, what's that? The Roy Cohn method.
The Roy Cohn method, right? And I need to go ahead and watch that movie, The Apprentice, or whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
Yes, though, and do people talk about the ignorance of this society? Do people even know who Roy Cohn was? Generally, no, right?
Yeah, generally no.
I only know about him because of the association with Trump and the conversation had about him in that context. That's the only reason why I know anything about him.
So see, and if this society really supported the arts, more people would know about him, because he ends up as a character in what is the play Angels in America. Right? But then they don't want to promote Angels in America. It's too queer. Right? Classic, play. Because he, again, living that, that was Roy Cohn, self-hating homosexual. As he's outing people for being homosexual during the McCarthy period, or ruining careers around that. So yeah, but so there's a small demographic, right? People who follow theater or teach drama, right? Actually, I know we're at time. I saw a speech and this was played by somebody on YouTube, where a pastor. And it was a black MAGA pastor at what looked like a primarily white, what do they call mega church, saying, "Look, don't let your sons join the drama club. Don't let them. Theater is the problem, right? Theater leads to
my God,
and all this types of thing. So the whole, the anti-art, the anti any kind of expression that doesn't fit in the box that we say is okay." But that orange fool got booed at the Kennedy Center for Les Miserables. So
yeah, well, then I heard people cheered him. The boos were drowned out by the cheers.
Oh, really? I heard
the
that
MAGA cheers.
They tried to drown them out.
It didn't work. Yeah, it was just a mixture of a lot of boos and some random cheers and a little applause. They tried try to bring up the rear, just like they did this weekend with
Like
these
they did yesterday.
communications.
Yeah,
Let
they
us
tried.
throw together some little counter protests. That lets you know.
Mhm.
You didn't even have a plan. You just showed up.
You didn't even have a plan.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah.
Well, we are now at an hour and 59, actually 2 hours on the dot. So
Yeah.
I guess we can go ahead and say good evening. This
Good
was great.
evening.
This was
Yes.
great catching up, James, and getting, this was
It's
great.
been too long.
It's
Okay.
been too
All right.
long and the time is right.
Yes, indeed. Thank you
Well,
so much.
yeah. And next time I'll be better prepared. Like I said, I got and I think everybody should be better prepared.
Yes.
That's
And
right.
maybe we
You
can
all
talk
have to
specifically
continue.
about the acceleration next
Yeah.
time.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
And so we had more length
Yeah. And
All
detail.
right.
and detail.
Okay.
Yes.
So we'll look forward to it. Okay, now, thank you everybody who joined us and or who will view it and catch up with us. And we will see you next time.
So remember to do all the things. Subscribe, like. We trying to, and what did I say last time? Help us get to 200. Help us get to 200 subscriptions.
Subscribe.
Y'all, help
200
us.
subscribers. Why not?
We must be nearly 50 subscribers away. Come on, y'all.
Yes.
Help us get to 200.
Come on now.
Like and do share. And if you're on Facebook, you can do some of those same things.
And comments would be great.
And comments
Yes.
would be great.
Please comment, especially if you don't agree.
Especially
Yes.
if you don't agree. That's
Yeah.
right. Maybe you are a Black MAGA who might come across this.
So let's
Mhm.
talk about
Or
that.
not in solidarity with the immigrants and the First Nations folks and the folks who were here before the Southwest was the United States and it was still Mexico, and whose descendants are still here. And you think they're foreign. We could talk about that. All right, y'all.
I know.
Peace, and we are